Awesome. Okay, so I am so excited. I'm Christina Hall. I'm one of the coaches with the UCSC Career Center. And today I am here talking with several of our alumni that have been able to become successful in careers that use their creativity. So the first thing I'm going to ask all of you to do is I'm going to go around or ask you to introduce yourself and then explain to us what it is you do for a living. Do you want to start, Shelley?
May as well.
Okay.
My name is Shelley Adina, and for a living, I have a three-way split between being an author. I have 42 books out, and one just came out today, as a matter of fact. If I'm looking a little ragged around the edges, that's why. The second career that I do is editing for indie authors. And the third career I do is running my own micro press. So really they're kind of all the same thing, but the tax man likes it when I split it out. I have a MFA in writing popular fiction along with my BA from UC Santa Cruz. And I'm getting a PhD right now in creative writing from Lancaster University in the United Kingdom.
That's really cool. Okay. Shira, would you like to introduce yourself and explain what it is you do for a living?
Sure. My name is Shira Bogin. I am an assistant registrar at the San Diego Museum of Art. For those who don't know what that means, I basically work in registration and collections management, working directly with the art collection, primarily involved with donations, loans, exhibitions, working more of the logistics behind the scenes compared to what you usually hear about, which is curatorial and the more public facing side of museum work. I got bachelor's degrees in art history and visual culture and anthropology at UC Santa Cruz, and went straight from there to grad school at NYU in museum studies.
Awesome. Great. David?
Yeah, my name is David Notowitz. I'm the founder and the lead forensic expert at the National Center for Audio and Video Forensics. It's here in Los Angeles, but we deal with audio and video and phone evidence from around the country. Usually brought to us by attorneys. And I went to school at UC Santa Cruz, very beautiful, fond memories. I still miss it, even now. It's been many, many years. I majored in theater arts with a film and video emphasis. Really, it was a film and video major, but within the theater arts division at the time, they didn't have a separate major for film and video production.
All right, great. So my first question is, was your career a straight line, or did you change course around the way? In other words, is what you're doing now what you always planned for or hoped to do for a living?
I go?
Sure.
I decided I was going to be a writer when I was 8, but you can't, when you're 8, you can't make a living doing this. So I was an executive admin for a long time. And then I moved into editing in like marketing collateral in Silicon Valley, which was really good training. And I took the editing certificate from Berkeley and figured out the difference between an M dash and an N dash and an ellipse. And then took those skills when I was laid off. The same week I was laid off from Hewlett Packard, the first publisher called me and said they wanted to buy my book. So I didn't care that I'd been laid off from Hewlett Packard. So it was a little bit of a zigzag in there while I was gaining skills. Being an executive admin, you organize people's time for a living. So running a micropress, I'm very disciplined, and you have to produce the books. You have to keep your clients happy. You have to keep a production schedule going and marketing schedules. And so all of those skills have tied together to do what I do now to support myself. And it's what I love. I cannot imagine any job that's better than this one.
So what about you, Shira? Is this like what you always wanted to do, is work with a museum, or is this something that came to you a little bit later on?
Not since I was 8, that's for sure. I do come from a family that has always really appreciated and loved travel and national parks and museums and that kind of world. And so that was instilled in me at a young age, but I don't think I really thought of it as applicable for a career actually until Santa Cruz. I was very lucky that at the time when I was in school for my undergrad, I kind of stumbled into my very first art history class that I took was not until the start of my junior year of undergrad. And they happened to be offering an intro to museums type of course. And it wasn't until I took that first class that I learned it was actually a 3-part series for the rest of the year. And each of those quarter-long classes got progressively more intense. So the first quarter was kind of introductory of just the history of museums. And then the winter quarter class was more about museum theory and actually visiting museums in the Bay Area and meeting different departments behind the scenes and learning about the different departments that make a museum run. And the final kind of thesis type thing for that class was actually putting together exhibition proposals. And the spring quarter class was a senior thesis level course of actually putting on one of those courses at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. So I was really lucky. A lot of people that go into a master's in museum studies actually just come from art history or history or literature sometimes, and they don't actually have any experience in museums themselves. And learning about those departments doesn't usually happen until a master's, but UC Santa Cruz actually gave me that opportunity earlier on, and that helped to form kind of my perspective of what part of museum studies really appealed to me. And that was the more logistics and kind of the organizational structure to make those things happen. So in a way, a lot of my career has been this one trajectory from there of, I discovered this as an undergrad. I went into grad school, internships and jobs since then have all been kind of in that niche. But, I really credit Santa Cruz for helping develop that and find it in the first place. I didn't even know museum studies was a master's program until that year.
I just learned it just now.
Yeah. Yeah, a friend and I had talked about it and we were like, did you know you can get a master's to be a librarian? Like this, it was shocking to us that those are programs that exist. And, I think the fact that those courses happened to be going on, and I think looking back on it, I think it was an endowed thing that only lasted for a couple years. So unfortunately, I don't know if that's still there, but I do know, the Museum of Art and History has been very open to interns and working with the college in the past.
What about you, David?
So I started off at Santa Cruz learning film and audio and video production. And then I went right down to Los Angeles after graduating and started working for television stations. So I had a lot of different stages I'm going to describe here. I definitely didn't go in a straight line. I started off working for television news, helping with the daily news segment on rare coins, of all things. And they had a daily segment on the Financial News Network that I was in charge of. But I was also working kind of behind the scenes with other people I knew that graduated from Santa Cruz, doing films with them, a documentary, a film, little things. And then ended up working on that station only for about a year, I think, a year and a half. And then I started working on a documentary feature that I really liked that could, for a longer job. After that, I worked on some corporate videos and continued doing documentaries and features, just here and there trying to find things. I did all that stuff for like 10 years, surviving actually, which is amazing, doing all this kind of crazy film work. It's very hard to survive, but I was living with 3 other guys, in an apartment, and everyone had their own room, thank God, but we're living as, low end as possible.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. And then, at some point I'm like I decided I wanted to get married. I wanted to support a family and all this stuff. And I started working in other areas of film production, which I was doing wedding videos for a while, and I was doing other corporate videos. It was a little more consistent, running my own business that way. And even that wasn't, it was fine. It worked for a long time. I got married, a couple kids, but I knew a friend of mine finally called me, an attorney, and he said, I have a court case. I knew he was an attorney, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, and I have video involved in this. This is 2001, a long time ago. And I helped him out with that case. I didn't think I could. I was nervous because I'd never worked on a court case before. And I helped him with that court case with the video evidence. And just to cut it short, that was very interesting. Didn't do anything more with that, with forensics, until 2006 when he called me again, the same guy. So 5 years later, he called me again and said, and at that point I said, wow, this is something I could see becoming really big. You know, with all the proliferation of surveillance video, body-worn video. The iPhone came out in 2007. So all these devices were coming out with video. People were hand-holding video even. So all this evidence was showing up for court cases. And I thought, okay, I'm going to pursue this. So I decided to transition away from all the other stuff, the wedding video stuff, the corporate stuff, the documentary and film stuff, which I loved, but that didn't bring me enough income really to support a family. And I went into forensics in 2007, pretty much full steam ahead.
So now you're the guy that they call when there's a deep fake video.
Yeah, that's a whole other new thing that, yes, deep fakes is a big, catchphrase right now and will become huge. It's not exactly there yet where the average person can fake the video, but it's really close. It's really close.
Crazy. So what should people that want to go into a career like yours know, and what kind of advice would you give like a young person that's like, oh my God, this is so cool, I want to do that too? Like, what would you tell them?
If I can go, I've actually had a lot of people come to me over the last 5-ish years asking this. Museums are something people all know about, but I think they don't know necessarily all of the layers and all the departments that make a museum run. And so that's usually the first thing I like to tell young people when they say, I want to work in a museum, is I ask them, okay, well, what do you want to do in a museum? And 9-ish times out of 10, it's usually, I want to be a curator. And most likely that's because curators are the most public facing members of a museum, other than executive directors. When you're looking in media or when you're reading news articles, it's usually talking to the executive director or the curators. And that's very designed because they're meant to be the public face of the museum. But a museum is just like any other nonprofit, that it requires so many departments to actually make the whole place run. Every museum, or most museums, depending on size, they have accounting, they have graphics, they have editors, they have, they have installers who are doing the actual construction work. They have registrars doing logistics. There's so many different departments that a lot of times you can take some of the skills you already have and apply them to different departments within a museum. So for instance, like David's work with film editing, actually, we have a public programs manager at my museum who came from a film background originally, and now in the pandemic has pivoted to be able to use those film editing skills to move all the programming we usually had at the museum online. So there's a lot of different skill sets that can be applicable if you really want to work in a museum. That would be kind of the first thing I would tell people. And then I would also say, once you figure out what kind of niche you want, if you want to work in education or programs or development, fundraising, that kind of thing, once you figure out your niche, that can help inform what your next steps are. Because there are certainly different fields within museums that do require a master's, or at least very heavily prefer a master's. Museums, like a lot of nonprofits, are very heavily impacted. There are a lot of people trying to get jobs. There are a lot of graduates and not enough open positions. And so for certain fields, like with registration or curatorial, having a master's, sometimes for curatorial in particular, a PhD, is really crucial to give you an edge over potentially 300, 400 other applicants who are trying for the same job, realistically. So those are kind of the first things I try to tell people, because I Christina, I think you said this before we started recording, I prefer to give people as much information as possible before they go too far into something.
Yeah. Shelley? Okay, go for it.
Well, it depends. For the editorial track, I actually get a lot of people coming to me through the career center saying, you know, I have this lit degree. What do I do now? And you're an editor, and what is that? And so I kind of guide them to training, first of all, like the Berkeley Certificate or the University of Chicago, the home of the Chicago Manual of Style, which you have to memorize anyway. You may as well get your certificate from the people that wrote it. And then, you know, start small with maybe you can work for a neighborhood magazine doing editing, or indie authors. There's a huge, this is like a multi-$100,000 market if you can get in and edit books for indie authors. There's corporate communications for large firms in Silicon Valley or any place really. And now that we're all virtual, editing is kind of the ideal job to do at home when you're connected. So the path for editing is pretty straightforward. Get your training, start small, branch out in the field that interests you. To become an author is kind of different. You probably want to get as much training as you can, like in a lit degree, creative writing minor, doing a lot of reading, the how to write, actually how to script a movie. Some of the books are really useful, like Robert McKee's Story is one of the best ones. It's meant for movies, but it's really good for books too. Blake Snyder, same thing, the Save the Cat series. Save the Cat Writes a Novel is like a primary text. I taught grad students for 17 years how to write novels, and these were kind of the books I directed them to. So once you have that, join an organization, Romance Writers of America, Science Fiction Writers of America, Sisters in Crime, depending on your genre. Or if you're into literary fiction, then maybe you want to do a master's or a PhD in creative writing and produce a work that will have some chops behind it and has a pretty good chance of finding its market. So, and then to do something like I do, running a micropress, it's mostly just experience. And if you can join a mastermind group with other authors who are doing it and sort of let them mentor you, that's also a very good way to kind of find your feet in that industry. So just depending on what the student needs when they contact me, I have step by step. Here's how you do it. Here's your path to getting where you want to be if you want to be in this field.
I would say, look, there's a bigger picture for me, and that is that when I went to school, they didn't teach me how to run a business. And, you know, I went to film school, learned all the techniques, you know, sound editing, video editing, and just the beginning level techniques. I really perfected them much later as I did the actual project. But I didn't know how to manage money or
taxes,
what they were, or marketing, or having a receptionist, like someone to, you know, someone to manage the office or something. Like, I didn't know about running a business. And that's the thing that I think is really weak where I went to school, but it's also not the purpose in some ways. But, you know, to say, like, to get into what I'm doing it's a very niche thing to do audio and video forensics for court cases. But the people I hire are very specific to the film industry. So I hire a lot of film people, like someone who's an expert in audio production. So if you love audio and you want to do it, become a real, like, dive in, like, become an expert in that software and pick a software, become an expert, maybe a couple pieces of software, and do projects and make a lot of mistakes. I found that making the mistakes is the best way to learn. I did a huge amount of projects over the years in audio and video, and it's all about just doing the work and learning the project. So when I'm looking to hire someone, I just want to see samples of what they've done and to understand the software that they know, and that's how I decide who I'm going to hire, basically. But so, and then lastly is I most need to have someone who's reliable and trustworthy. If someone's going to work for me, if they're not, number one, they don't come in when they say, or they're not reliable over time, it's not going to work out at all. And secondly, I have to be able to trust them because of the work that we deal with, which is a lot of forensic stuff. So it's court related, and a lot of stuff that we don't want to get out into the news. You know, it's private. So reliability and trustworthiness is super important as well.
Hi, Scott.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So we got started, but you're not too far behind. And just to let you know, we're recording this so that we can present it to students later. As I was telling my guest earlier, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to manage whether students are going to attend virtual events or not.
Totally.
But so that you can catch up, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, and then you can answer questions with everybody else.
Sweet. Well, yeah, no, thank you. Sorry, I was running a little bit late there, but yeah,
okay.
My name's Scott Leiserson. I'm a producer, an editor, and a lot of other small hats that get worn in a small production company. So, but I work at a production company here in Santa Cruz, Lensfire Films, and primarily we work on documentaries and commercials with a documentary angle to it, typically. And yeah, just kind of everyday kind of chaos coordination of, you know, changes coming down the pipe or whatnot. We're trying to land different clients in different ways, but yeah, that's kind of just very, very broad strokes of what I do. And but I graduated from UCSC in 2013, film digital media, Porter. I was part of all of the student media organizations, SCTV and Film Production Coalition, and On the Spot as well. So yeah, broad strokes.
So the first question that we ask is if you felt like your career was a straight line, like have you ended up where you thought you would end up? Have you had any bumps on the road on the way to getting there, or?
That's an interesting question. I think in general, when I see friends from back home, which is San Diego, people are like, "Wow, you're doing what you wanted to do." And like in high school, I was wanting to do video, and I was the guy running around with the video camera, making videos at this pep assembly and all this stuff. But I would say that it wasn't linear at all. And I graduated and, you know, got an internship very randomly, you know, just starting to say, yes, please, I want to work, anything, give it to me. And that was interesting and kind of got thrown in the deep end a little bit. And I think that experience kind of taught me that we're all kind of in the deep end, kind of, you know, like it is just whatever job or whatever problem you're trying to solve, you don't necessarily know what you're doing exactly in that moment, except your job is to figure it out and develop and build and create. And so from there, I actually got hired at UCSC for 5 years. I worked in the student media department for 5 years. That was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh. Who was that? Who are you working for?
Under student life in Someka. So I was with Sayo Fujioka, was my direct supervisor. But yeah, I worked in the student media department and with the TV organization. So that was interesting because it wasn't production, which is what I was definitely wanting to do and was doing. But was able to make a handful of alumni profiles through my job there. But then kind of very happen chance, I moved in with someone in Santa Cruz and they were a freelance cinematographer. And I was like, I love editing and I love data management, the things that people forget about. But eventually kind of took a leap and we had a big project that lined up and I left UCSC and kind of started this production company. And now it's been 3 years, just over 3 years, and we're still going. And yeah, so it's been interesting in that route, but I've always had a knack and desire to work in video production at some level. And I think every job that I've had, which, you know, two main jobs coming out of school that overlap, but having some internships and freelance work, everything just teaches you is like, cool, you're a solution provider. Client wants something, you know, friend, family, or whatever, they want a video, a product. Your job is to help translate what they're asking into your technical terms and kind of trying to vision that and execute it. And there isn't a, oh, well, that's like doesn't work. You're like, okay, well, this way doesn't work. But you know, if we took 2 paper towels, we can rub them together to create dust, and it looks really cool in slow-mo. And surprisingly, we've used that on some big productions. And so I think that's the biggest thing I've learned in any of my work, either related. I worked at a ranch when I was at UCSC, if that was fun with horses. But either way, it was being a solution provider. And I think that's a lot to do with video production immensely. So yeah, there's a roundabout to that question, but yeah, very much non-linear, but always open, kind of what's out there, what can I be a part of, and you know, just see what opportunities are there. And I think the hardest thing was realizing when to say no, which was definitely a you know, handful of lessons in learning to say no about projects or things like that. So eventually being able to find what you want to do and executing always feels good.
All right. So my next question, and we have had, I think, somebody else come and join us, Serena.
Hi.
Hi. So we kind of already got started, but feel free to just put any questions you have in the chat or just pipe it and ask if you have questions for a panelist, okay?
Okay.
All right, so the next question that I wanted to ask you guys is, what are some things that you think college students should do now to prepare to be successful in a career like yours?
Well, I will say, and this kind of goes back to the last question a little bit, because I feel like I may have been a little scary implying that most of the departments and museums require a master's. Just want to clarify, not all of them do. Some of them definitely don't. And like Scott said, some of them you can get to from zigzaggy measures. You know, we have plenty of people that end up in education departments at museums that got teaching credentials and thought they were going to be teachers, or we have plenty of graphic artists that studied fine arts and they end up doing graphic arts for museums, designing labels and marketing materials, you know, things that end up on the sides of buses and stuff like that. So there's so many different ways to get into it, and not all of them are necessarily just the master's route, or just, you know, a master's in museum studies or in a PhD of a specific art history, just to clarify that. But what I would definitely say to students who are on the verge of graduating or who are still, you know, in the last couple of years of their undergraduate is look into, if you're interested in museums now, reach out to local places and see about interning. That's really the best thing you can do for yourself, especially as an undergraduate, is reaching out to, you know, Museum of Art and History or the Natural History Museum, or even, you know, small archives. There's a need for interns at pretty much every museum I've ever worked at. You're talking about nonprofits that are usually, they don't have enough staff to get done all the projects that they have on their plates. So interns are really helpful, and it gives you a lot of experience to be able to see behind the scenes how things work. And, you know, I think too, to Scott's point about saying no, I found for myself, sometimes the best experiences I've had were places that I actually learned I don't want to do this. I think you can learn a lot from, you know, trying out new things and seeing, is this something I want to do, and being able to narrow down what you're actually interested in. And sometimes you can't know that until you're actually in a workspace.
Anybody else with ideas? Scott, do you have an idea?
Yeah, I guess going off that is like, yeah, in any situation that, you know, you're like, oh, this is, I don't like, you're banging your head against the wall, or, you know, just any situation, you should be able to learn something from it. You should be able to learn that you don't do it that way. You know, you should never be bored in trying to figure out the task at hand, because it's just all information that you can have, and it's data sets that you have for yourself. So I think that, you know, and going to the point of calling these places, like, I think the biggest thing I tell students sometimes when I was at UCSC too, is just very much like, you know, kind of cold call. Like, you're not guaranteed anything, but like, at my company now, I tell people, you know, hey, we're not hiring right now, so things are happening, but we're, just, reach out in like, a month or 3 months. And then they reach out, and then just happens to be when we have a job that pops up and we just need, some extra hands. And then slowly things can get evolved from there. I think the cold call sometimes, like I said, it's no guarantee, and you'll deal with rejection for sure, but is a way to, I think, really, if there's some place you want to go and you want to be at, like, be persistent. You don't want to be annoying, but it helps to be like, hey, I'm here. Hey, what else can I help with? I really want to be part of your team. Hey, I'm willing to come out for, a week trial. If I can come out as a volunteer for a week, what does that look like? And a lot of the times, if someone, we've had that happen, we're not giving the person who's volunteering like the PA job necessarily, or like running to get food. You're like, okay, you volunteered, we're going to kind of bring you in and do something else. So I think that's another thing is to, if you have somewhere you want to work, it can seem daunting to be like, oh, Saturday Night Live or something. And it is not going to be easy to get there. But I think it is to remember that you can keep knocking on that door and pulling on that thread to figure out where you want to be, and to cut ties where you don't want to be. And you can do that.
Yeah, I agree that there's, in that vein, we do get calls occasionally, or people talking to us wanting to come in, and I tell them, no, there's nothing available, just like you said, Scott. So follow up with me in a month or two. And there's a lot of the people we never hear from again. They don't follow up. And that's there on them. That's like, it just shows me they're not, as interested, but also maybe not as organized, or maybe they don't care as much. But if you really care, guess what? If you follow up in a month or two, I'll be way more interested to hear you that second time. It's not a cold call anymore. Then it's a warm call. It's like, it's funny, but your cold call becomes different now. And even if I can't take you then, give me a call, I'll say, call me back in a month, see what happens. So if you really do that, it's very valuable. And actually, I think any business person would be impressed if you can stay organized to actually follow up, to maybe learn something more that maybe we talked about, to become an expert in a piece of software, or at least a little more knowledgeable in a certain area of the software, something like that. So if I mention a 3D reconstruction software, maybe you become knowledgeable in it, or at least look into a little more. And if you do, wow, it's great. It's really impressive.
To that point, I mean, that might depend on industry a little bit. I'll just say,
sure,
from my own experience working in museums and nonprofits, nonprofits are really, they have to adhere to a lot of laws that, labor laws that have to do with interns. So like, for instance, the museum I'm at, we have an active internship program with a local university, because they can receive academic credit for interning here. So it does depend, like if we just get contacted out of nowhere, saying, I really want to volunteer, there's certain laws that we have to be really careful on what kind of labor we're taking in. So keep that in mind. But, like Scott said, there's no harm in trying. And even if you get a no that time, it may mean that your name is, in someone's head when a position does open up. I think too, what I'm seeing for a lot of what we call emerging museum professionals that are people just starting out is a lot of taking applicable skill sets to other professions so that they can hone those more if they're not finding many museum jobs. So, it's kind of crazy, but some people are getting really creative. I saw somebody posting a job about an auto body shop that had an inventory position for inventorying everything in the shop. And that's something that's very applicable to what I do, where we're inventorying art collections and, we're having to track 20,000 objects, So, you never know what kind of skills could be transferable. I know, I saw that and I was like, wow, they're really impressive. When fields are so impacted, I think, you have to get a little bit creative in thinking outside the box sometimes. I would also say too, since you're still a student, use the university. UCSC has so many resources. Like Scott was talking about the different media groups that he was part of. I worked at KZSC too, and that was something that really helped me a lot with speaking and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I had a friend that worked on curating a show at the gallery at UC Santa Cruz and got a lot of experience doing that and was able to put that on a resume. So when you have a university too, you know, I think a lot of students don't realize how many resources they have available to them right there that are so easy for them to access that are much more difficult once you're not in that environment anymore.
I always say to people that they should do things they love and do, follow what's interesting to you, as well as hopefully that you'll get, you will study it more, you'll pay more attention to it, and hopefully find a way to make a living and using some aspect of that they care about, that they're interested in.
I often find people who say, oh, I want to write the great American novel. And I ask them, well, what was the last thing you read? And they were like, some book in school. And it's like, that's not how you become a writer. We all start out as readers. And if you want to start, like when you're in your BA program, how come you're not reading a book a week in the genre or the field that you want to write in? And are you following authors? Are you going to conferences? Are you, somebody comes to speak at Bookshop Santa Cruz and they're in the genre that you love. Why are you not in the front row asking questions about their writing process? That kind of thing. There are lots of ways to kind of edge your way into the writing community that doesn't involve shelling out gobs of money. It's a learning process. And sometimes you can go to the library and find books on writing and use them. Like you all were saying, use the resources you've got on hand and then branch out.
Well, Shelley, to your point too, and I'm sure, I'd imagine it's the same with the film industry, museums too, there's so many associations that you can tap into. There's the California Association of Museums, there's the American Alliance of Museums, there's the Western Museum Association, there's like every department within museums have their own associations on top of that. So there are so many groups out there. And I found with museums, that's been one of the best resources because they all do conferences. Now with COVID, they're all doing virtual programming and virtual panels and all sorts of things that are a good way not only to learn about the different skills and workshops and stuff like that, but also a good way to network with other people who may be interested in what you want to do, or people in similar boats as you who down the road will become part of your broader network. So those are resources that are really, really useful too.
And a lot of these resources are free. I mean, Sisters in Crime, their monthly meetings are like, forensics and policemen and how to craft a plot and a gamut, 57 ways to find poison in your home. And a lot of the, you got to know this when you're writing mysteries, but a lot of these meetings are free. And why not join a few of them and get some craft skills under your belt?
Yeah, 100%.
Is it kind of frustrating, Shelley, when you meet, if you're a new writer and you meet like 37 other people that all want to become famous writers, and like no one's, you don't know who they are and they're not making a living doing it, and you're like, oh, it's like hard.
Well, you go to the places where the writers who are actually working, you don't even have to be famous in order to be able to pay the mortgage. And that's what most of us care about anyway. But you go to conferences where they are and you kind of sidle up to them at the, at the bar and listen to what they're talking about. Are they talking about market forces? Are they talking about how to kill somebody with chlorine? Everything, arsenic, everything that kind of wraps into what you may do in the future. It's all grist for the mill. It all goes into the pot.
Yeah, and when we were talking about different organizations, totally true for me too. Like there's the Audio Engineering Society. Like whoever thought Audio Engineering Society, it's fascinating. Bunch of gigs that they do. You can actually, I go to events, they show films from major Hollywood films. It's very interesting. And they talk about all the audio technologies and the audio software used to create the soundtrack. It's a lot of fun and people are super serious in this one little niche,
I would say too, a little newer, but Twitter. I found a lot of museum people are using Twitter to connect with each other and connect with the public. In fact, earlier when I think it was Scott was saying you learn from your accidents and your mistakes just as much. Just yesterday, I saw someone had started a whole Twitter thread where they asked people who work in collections management, like I do, to write in their horror stories of times they've accidentally damaged an artifact on the job. And
confess that in public?
well, and the person said, you know, feel free to private message and I can make it anonymous. And their point, though, which was a fair point, is that a new, you know, an emerging museum professional had accidentally damaged something and was horrified and thought that their whole career was over because of it. And so this person started a whole Twitter chain to show them this happens all the time. People are human, and 9.8 times out of 10, a conservator is going to be able to take care of it. So, you know, and a lot of times those accidents happen when you're really nervous. And so, you know, it was a good learning tool for people to look at. And you know, it's just one example, but I've seen so many things like that where, you know, you have professionals connecting with each other and starting these dialogues in this new setting that, you know, Twitter's been around for a while, but I think it's just starting in the last few years to become used in a more academic way sometimes.
I think
So I guess
Crazy
you
Glue
can
and
have,
Duck,
Shelley, you can do us in a character that's klutzy with their museum artifacts.
I will say, actually, I used to work at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, and one of my colleagues there told me how he once met, you know, we do courier trips on trucks, sometimes couriering art across the country, and he had said he had met a truck driver, someone once who he had written a book all about like the Maltese Falcon falling on somebody and killing them in the middle of Hollywood. So it's interesting what people end up writing, and I wonder if they consulted the Academy before writing that.
I can swear that duct tape and crazy glue applies in all of our industries on this panel.
Oh yeah, gaff tape is everything. Well, going back to I think, yeah, taking advantage of the resources. So if you're a student now, either, you know, junior, senior, freshman, sophomore, I'll name them all, but I think is just really take advantage of what you have there. I mean, you know, for me, I remember like I was taking loans and I was like, okay, like, am I gonna buy like a lens or something? And like, you know, my roommate and I, we kind of like developed our own kind of kit of stuff, but that like cost money and like, you know, still paying them off. And I think, you know, what eventually we both pinched ourselves for, we're like, why don't we just keep going to the media center? Like they have $5,000 cameras that I can just walk, you know, you got to get certified, you got to have training, you got, you know, you're registering, but like you get to walk away with it without giving any money. Because you already gave money in some other avenue. And so I think that's a huge thing to like, especially in the film world, is like, you should check out the equipment, start pushing every button and going, what does this do? What does that do? And same with the software. And if you're not able to get access on your own machines, go there, open labs, find open labs, and just like mess around. And I remember in high school with Final Cut 7 back in the day, was very much like, I just took one clip and I just put every effect on it. And I just sat there and I was like, oh, that's cool. What's that do? Oh, that's cool. That's what that does. And that, I think, really helps. Just, you know, one, you're doing the hard work of just sitting down and figuring out what you're trying to work with. But also, you, in this process, and this was also mentioned, is like your network, the network of people you have at school go on to, they also get to do things out in the world. And, you know, we have a Facebook group which is called Slugs in LA. I'm not in LA, I'm in Santa Cruz, but anytime we have students go, sometimes we add people in, and usually this is where the first, you know, PA jobs get posted, you know, for something like, hey, here's a job, or, you know, a coordinator, we need a producer. It's going to be up here for 3 days before I, you know, blast it everywhere else. And so there is a network that is, you know, the people you go to school with. And I think, you know, and even we just had a situation where like, oh, we need like, you know, I think we need like a lawyer here, and like, oh, we have a lawyer that we went to that was part of our film group. Oh, you're doing media law. Oh, this is great. So I think there's not necessarily directly even in your industry, which is for sure the people you immediately surround yourselves with, but also people who go on and do different things. There's a network, and being open-minded, chatting through different scenarios of what the problem is and what you're trying to shoot or create or whatever, being able to tap in that network is huge. And I think you get to develop that there with free access to resources and having a like-minded community who's interested in learning these things. So I think
Yeah, one of the things that I like what you said very much. One of the things I encourage people to be is a lifelong learner, and always continue to grow and learn in whatever area you're interested in. I know that when I was starting out, I wanted to get access to the bigger machines that like you said, you can't afford, but I wanted to learn about them. And so I helped out when I became friends with someone nearby where I was living, and he had a studio. I said, look, I'm going to help you out on a very specific area, like he needed some things done. I said, look, I'll help you out. So think about how you can help out someone that you're interested in getting involved in, how you can contribute, even if it's a simple level. And I said, once I do that, but I want to use this system that I wanted to get my hands on, an editing system. And so I helped him out like on a weekend, and all Sunday I could just use it for free. I wasn't helping him out. I could just use the system for free. He knew I wasn't going to mess it up. He trusted me with it. So I got to learn on it and play with it. Another job I had with Financial News Network, they had this big old editing suite, this huge switcher, and I wanted to get my hands on it. I wanted to see how they work, all the buttons would work and everything. And I asked the right people, and they, yeah, sure, middle of the night, we're not using it, so you can come in middle of the night and use it. And so I did. I used it middle of the night. I pushed a few buttons and learned more about, what it did. And a lot of times on the job, you learn a lot. So volunteer. I know you said about volunteering, Shira, that it's like against the rules maybe as an intern, but on small businesses when they have 3 employees, and they'll informally let you work for free on a weekend, and you can help them out, and they can help you out. It's not.
Yeah, really, I think it really depends on industry and size. There's so many factors with it. But I certainly, one of my favorite internships was me just emailing. They didn't have any internship posted. I just reached out saying, you guys have a great collection. Is there anything I'd be able to do? And it worked out. And I was able to intern full time for 3 months. So, it's not impossible. But I would say, there's just some navigating for nonprofits in particular, I'd say.
Especially the bigger organizations, they're not going to take a chance like that. Like for me, I never have an intern. I pay people, so it makes it easy. Even if it's someone cold calling, like I mentioned, if someone persistent and is reliable and comes back, yeah, I'll pay them if I need them.
That kind of leads into my next question. I was going to ask if any of you hired interns or entry-level employees at all for your organizations, those of you that have like an organization that you're a part of, and what do you look for?
I don't. I'm a one-person shop. Oh, except for cover design. I can't design covers, so I hire a cover design. There's tons of them out there, and I just hire them on a per job basis.
But Shelley, you must have an editor.
I am an editor.
But you do your own editing, or do you have someone else that helps you edit your books?
I do my own editing. I can't afford someone with as much training as me. And it happens to work.
It's great. Like for me, when we need to hire someone, I'm looking for someone who's really proficient in some software that we're working on, whether it's audio editing or video editing. You mentioned Final Cut Pro. That's as you know, it's an older. So we use Adobe now, Adobe Premiere. I started off with Final Cut Pro also. Amazed, I was cutting in film, at Santa Cruz. And then I was doing linear with, video editing. And finally, Final Cut Pro. I was like, Final Cut, this is just astounding. Final Cut version 2, I think it was. Oh, it was at 2 or 1.2. I can't remember now. I had 2 in it. Might be 2.1 or 1. Anyways, really a long time ago. But all that software is really important. The second thing is if they want to be like a receptionist in my office, it's a great way to learn. It sounds boring, I know, but all the people who are calling to inquire about projects and if we can help them, forces the receptionist to learn a lot and learn everything about what we do. So once they do that, they can move on and become a case manager, for example, or an expert in one area if they are already. So
kind of, it's like the person who bartends so they can do stand-up comedy, and get their 5 minutes. It's the same thing. It's just like, cool, you got to put in your time, show people that you're dedicated, show people that you're responsible. I think that's right when I hopped on. That was being talked about was looking for people who, cool, I can trust you. When I say you're going to show up, you show up, or you at least communicate. And I think the biggest thing is communication in all realms. And I think for our company, you know, we're a small company, we're 4 people, but depending on the project, we'll bring in contractors and different things like that. And you know, a big thing is I do get hit up by students a lot, or just people who've, you know, seen us on Instagram or something. Hey, you know, I'd love to be part of this. You know, again, I think the persistency we've talked about is like, if you're able to just be that squeaky wheel and like, oh yeah, there's a job. Oh, this could actually work here. I think this could be a, you know, possibility, just even have coffee, and then it rolls into something else. But I think knowing specifics of like, I'm a sound person. I love audio, or I'm an audio engineer, or, you know, I love After Effects or Premiere, like knowing those skills. And I think also David was saying as I hopped on, do you just have something that, you know, proves that you were part of something, that you could, you know, kind of see something through execution. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just, you know, knowing that you know, because if something happens and I can't trust that you're going to be there or do it in a good way, you know, that doesn't help to be there to be there longer. And I think that's just a nature of any job. But I think the film industry, at least from my perspective, is very much like the person you've worked with most recently, who you had fun with, who did a really good job, who made your life easier. Those are the people who get called back. And I think that's another thing, is when you're reaching out to someone, or you're being part of an organization, you got a job, think about what the person above you, we like to think we're in a flat hierarchy, but there is someone above you. How do you make their job easier? And I think it's easy to get frustrated. Oh, they asked me to do this. Now I have to relabel all this, and it's going to take like 6 days or blah, blah, blah. And it's going to be very tedious. But think about why that person is asking that. And I think that was super helpful for me. Something my dad taught me was be aware of that, you know, and figure out how you can fit in, and if you make other people's lives easier, you're ultimately, you know, a value add. And that's how you continue to stay there and make yourself invaluable, I think is another thing. That doesn't mean to go work 24 hours a day and like, you know, break your back, but that just means be a value add, and ask what that is. If you want, take more responsibility on, you know, I had a lot of students or friends be like, oh, after 6 months, I need a pay raise just because it's been 6 months. And you're like, what? You know, what other responsibilities are you taking on? What are you helping grow here, and that sort of thing? Don't think in just time increments. Think in what you're building, and not just clock in, clock out. But yeah.
The editorial process is similar. Like the editor will send you a revision letter, and it's 17 pages long, and you do all the things that she says, and then the last step is to do that thing that she hasn't thought of, but that will blow her doors off. And then you are the author who will be contacted for a special project, 3 writers in a trilogy that they're going to put out at Christmas. You'll be the one they call, because they know that you're an original thinker, and you have that quality that puts out more than is just what's asked for.
Yeah, I think that's a super valuable point, Scott, of keeping in mind, am I making this person's job easier, or am I, you know, helping to make the department run more efficiently? That kind of attitude goes a long, long way. Because similarly to what you're saying, for registration and collections management, it is a lot of tedium sometimes. There's a lot of data management. There's a lot of cataloging. You know, sometimes, I mean, when I first started here, we had a collection of 780 photographs that had come in from one donation that still needed cataloging, you know, and you have to sit and catalog every single one and measure every single one and, you know, go through every single detail. But that's something that's valuable to learn. And if you're an intern or you're entry level and given those tasks, and they may seem really tedious or really repetitive, you know, those are something that somebody has to do in the department. And if they're trusting you to do it, that's a good thing. And if you do a good job at it, it just means that they're going to trust you more to, you know, work on the next thing or work on something else. So it's good to build up those skills. And when it comes to hiring For me, I haven't hired an entry level, but I've hired interns. So, our interns, like I mentioned earlier, are usually undergraduates. And what I look for when we're interviewing and speaking with students is who's most engaged, who really wants to learn. Like David said earlier, being a lifelong learner, being open to learning new things and wanting to, learn different skill sets, that's really valuable. So if you show you're enthusiastic and you show you're willing to learn anything, I think that can go a long way.
And I love too when people have other interests that are not the specific thing that they can maybe contribute to our company later on. So if someone, let's say, is really good, like I said, in the software, which I've mentioned a few times, but maybe I can tell they'd be really good on the phone. They're really good at socializing. They'd be really good at decorating. I know it sounds crazy, but like designing or something. I know they'd be good with Photoshop, or they'd be good at helping. I know in my back of my mind, I'm going, well, I want to redesign the office. Maybe they can help with that. Like there's other skills. And so if someone can think outside the box and listen while they're there, think, how can I contribute outside of this very specific thing that they brought me in to do? It's a very valuable, and people will like that.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, we've hired interns that once, we meet with them and they interview and we learn what their different interests and skills are, they end up, the last intern we had actually, kind of moved around different departments. And so it wasn't like they were just getting the curatorial experience. They were learning about curatorial, learning about registration, learning about the library. They were learning from various departments because those were things that were brought up in an interview of, these are different skills that I'm interested in growing. So then us, as the business, we can sit there and say, well, how can we tailor this experience to help them grow the most?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, and one thing that, in the same realm and is in a slight different context, but in the, if you're a PA, a production assistant, and you're just there to be extra hands, you're literally fire watch, you're just making sure someone's with the gear or something, or getting food, or getting coffee, going to do the coffee run. There's two reasons people ask you for the coffee run. First one, they want coffee. They're tired, they're thirsty, they want coffee. Number two, it goes to what was just said by multiple people, is that can you get it right? Can you just do that? And that is a very small thing, but it is like, if you mess up the coffee, and there's only 4 coffees.
It's a test.
Like that's not like, oh, you messed up the coffees, you really want to do something else. Like that, it's not necessarily the next thought. So I think it is just in that same vein of tedious elements, or just things that you're like, this is not what I'm doing. This seems, whatever, but do it well, impress the people. And that's how you show, that's the show versus tell. Show that you want to be here. And I think that is taking the extra initiative to, be ready, stand, you're ready to go, and that sort of deal.
So believe it or not, it's already 4:30. Isn't that crazy? It went really fast, right? So I just wanted to confirm with you guys, if any students were interested in speaking with you, you're all on UCSC's Career Advice Network, right? Does anybody have any other social media that they want to shout out that people could like potentially follow them on or find them at?
At Shelley Adina on Twitter, ShelleyAdina.com on the web.
All right.
You can find me anywhere.
All right.
At the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop recording now because that's our hour. But if anybody wants to hang out, I don't know, Serena, if you have extra questions or anything else that you might need, just let us know. Thank you so much for participating. I appreciate your time. I'm definitely going to send this out to some of the students, especially in our art division and our humanities division, because it's a really big personal goal of mine to keep our creative students creative and doing work that they can be enthusiastic about. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
I really appreciate it.
All right.